Next up until now, the Democratic primary fight between Senator Ed Markey and his challenger, Congressman Joe Kennedy, has gotten modest media attention. Chalk it up to a raging pandemic, a national protest movement, and a presidential race with a lot at stake. But now things are heating up, and the press is getting pulled into the fray. Elections are always more interesting when things get heated, and this week's NBC 10 debate suggested that's the case here.
I just don't talk about change. I lead to change.
There is so much more that is needed at this moment.
But now Joe Kennedy is claiming he has another opponent, the Boston Globe editorial page, which endorsed Ed Markey this week, citing his leadership on climate change. In a post-endorsement email, Kennedy's campaign manager said the Ed board had dismissed Kennedy's candidacy from the start, but also that it was a close call, but the establishment voices won out. In fact, Globe editorial page editor Bina Venkatraman says that's the exact opposite of what happened.
We had a pretty intense deliberation process, but when it came down to it, the board really converged pretty solidly in our deliberation around Markey.
Because Venkatraman says he's a crucial voice on climate at a moment of extreme urgency.
The window is closing to act to avoid catastrophic climate change. Here we have, it's like you don't take Larry Bird out of the Game 7 of the NBA Finals in the fourth quarter.
The Kennedy camp also accused the Globe of protecting the status quo for its white, well-off readers. Venkatraman says that misses the mark, big time.
Americans of color at a much higher rate are concerned about and want to act on the climate crisis. It might just reinforce the decision, the response to cast that as a sort of catering to a white audience.
And she notes there's some irony to Kennedy's post-endorsement spin.
The Globe editorial board in its history, I was trying to nail this down for sure. It either has never endorsed against a Kennedy or almost never.
Yet another sign we're living in interesting times. Joanna Weiss, you, I think, were part of a fair number of endorsement deliberations when you worked at the Globe, right? Is this sort of a familiar narrative to you? The ad page makes its endorsement, and then the candidate, says, "Oh, I wasn't treated fairly. They're not looking out for the people who matter." Or is this something a little more unique at play here?
Yeah, I want to be clear. I wasn't in the room where this one happened, but yes, I've been in a lot of those rooms. And yes, the Kennedy campaign is doing what campaigns do in this circumstance. They're trying to spin it and they're trying to complain in the way that helps their cause. On the face of it, it's absurd. If you think about some of the recent Globe congressional endorsements in primaries, they endorsed Ayanna Pressley over Mike Capuano. They endorsed Seth Moulton over John Tierney. So this idea that they're always for the establishment is, on the face of it, patently absurd. There's always a lot of mystery that goes into how these decisions get made. And really, honestly, all the ones that I've been in have been incredibly thoughtful and deliberative processes. And the one thing that I think the public doesn't get to see and understand is that so much of it often hinges on the quality of the interview. These candidates come in, and they come in for often an hour at a time, and they're really lengthy and considered and interesting conversations. And the way a candidate performs in that setting can be really enlightening to the members of the board. It was interesting to see the New York Times broadcast their conversations, because there is something very enlightening about being in that room.
Yeah, I have said and written before that I think that endorsements in really high-profile races, such as president, of course, and U.S. Senate, don't really make much of a difference because people make up their own minds. I think the reason the Kennedy camp is whining so much this time is that this may be one of those rare instances where the endorsement does make a difference. I don't mean that it's going to make the difference in terms of, Senator Markey's going to win now. But I do think that the Globe's readership, looking at two progressive Democrats who essentially praise each other's record and stances on the issue, and the whole thing comes down to this generational argument, I think that readers might be genuinely looking for a little bit of guidance. And so in this particular case, I think the Globe endorsement for Markey might make the difference for a few of those readers. And it seems to me that that's why the Kennedy camp is so upset about this.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just upset and it's sour grapes. And so what? You didn't get the endorsement. Be a better candidate. What's interesting to me about this, and I think it goes back to our first segment a little bit, is the timing on this. They had to do it early. And I think it's another example of how campaigns have become dispersed and diffused in this age of early and mail-in voting. Things like endorsements, debates, campaign spending, they're all different. It's all now spread over a big period of time where we used to have a snapshot of one-day election. We choose the person. Now campaigns are spread out. And these little moments don't have, I think, the impact that they used to have. And I think as far as endorsements, Dan, I know you wrote about this, whether endorsements in general are going to, stick around and that they have less impact than they used to. I think that you can't forget that as politically as they might not have as much impact, they're still marketing for a newspaper, in my belief. They do this and they get people to talk about them. There was a lot of interest, a lot of reporting about the endorsement of the Markey locally. So they do get that interest. And I still think that's part of the calculus for them continuing to endorse in many races.
So I think they probably get more attention when they go against what people might expect. So I thought it was very interesting that the Globe has never gone against a Kennedy. So in this case, both candidates are at a disadvantage because we're in a pandemic. They cannot do the door-to-door retail stuff that really puts most candidates on the map. This is unusual in that, we know both of them somewhat. And the question that a lot of voters had from the beginning, they still have, why are they running against each other? They're so kind of close in what they think. So I think that, therefore, the Globe putting together its own argument about why it supports Markey becomes more important in this time because it allows some voters to, have a shorthand, which is how I've always used these endorsements, not as necessarily what I would do, but as a shorthand for some strong arguments for the candidate. But now I will say, interestingly, in this time, because people haven't been paying attention, it may also have the impact of making people take that and then say, well, wait a minute, let me go see what Kennedy is doing because he's reacting so strongly against what the Globe is saying. So I might go take a more deep look at what his camp is saying, that why they're better and should have had the endorsement if anybody was going to be endorsed. So it could actually work to both of their advantages.